Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWUS. It is New Year's Eve, which means we're talking college football. Got 4 bowl games and then the playoff game between Penn State and Boise State. So obviously I know most of you are going to click on this to see the Penn State-Boise State game, but I'm going to go through the 4 bowl games first. So I'll put timestamps in there if you want to just fast forward to the Penn State one. But yeah, New Year's Eve, college football. Let's do it. Welcome to the SWUS. Hey, get the sauce. Up, we got Alabama, Michigan in the ReliaQuest Bowl. Michigan's catching 13.5 points in this one. Total sitting at 43.5. Let's get into it. We'll start with the Alabama offense against the Michigan defense. On paper, this should be a good matchup here. Alabama's offense is 16th in OFEI. Michigan's defense is 17th. So based on the full season production, this should be an even matchup. The problem is in terms of inactives, in terms of opt-outs, it's pretty one-sided. Alabama's going to be missing Justice Haynes, which is their backup running back, who does see the ball. He does see the field, but that's it. Other than that, we should get the Alabama offense at full strength. On the Michigan defense, we're missing all kinds of pieces here, both defensive tackles and edge rusher. The other edge rusher is going to play, though. It was looking like they were going to be missing both defensive ends, but the other guy I'm reading is going to stay. He's going to play, but they're still missing Stewart. And then their star corner, Johnson, Will Johnson. I think he's actually hurt. I don't think he actually opted out. I think he opted out because he was hurt. But yeah, we're talking about 4 key pieces missing from this Michigan defense. The reason missing those pieces on the defensive line is so crucial for Michigan is that's where their advantage would be in this matchup. The weakness of this Alabama offense has always been the offensive line. That's dating back to last year. Michigan's defensive front is tough. They're tough to run on, tough to generate push against. You take out 3 starters from the defensive line and it closes this gap. So I don't know how big the advantage is for Michigan on the defensive front anymore, considering Alabama's coming in basically at full strength offensively. So I know if you look at recent game logs for Alabama, you might think, they can't run the ball on Michigan. They ran the ball on Missouri, ran the ball on LSU. Then they saw a couple of tough defensive fronts in Oklahoma and Auburn, and they were unable to run the ball. So if you go by the game logs, Michigan, definitely a tough defensive front. I don't know if Alabama is going to be able to run the ball, but with the missing pieces up front, maybe Alabama is able to run the ball in this game. And in terms of Jalen Milroe making throws, I mean, Michigan's defense has shown us they're vulnerable to the pass. Last 2 games of the year, they look great. One was against Northwestern, they're trash, and the other one was against Ohio State. That was their Super Bowl, and Ohio State kind of choked. In the 3 games before that, offenses were able to throw the ball on Michigan a little bit. They allowed over 8 yards per pass attempt, over 46% success rate per dropback. That was against Michigan State, Oregon, and Indiana. So I do think Jalen Milroe will have opportunities to make throws in this game. The only issue I have with that are these crazy data points when it comes to Alabama's passing attack. They're everywhere. I mean, check this out. This is the second half of the season. In weeks 8, 11, and 13, Jalen Milroe really struggled to throw the ball. That Tennessee game, he was really bad. 5.83 yards per attempt, success rate under 38%, 178 passing yards per game. But in weeks 7, 9, and 14, he looked great. He looked like an NFL quarterback throwing the ball. Success rate over 49%, over 9.3 yards per attempt. So it's tough to make a prediction on what we're going to see here because if we look at the second half of the season, we're seeing such extremes in terms of production. Personally, with Michigan missing their defensive front, I think Jalen Milroe is going to have a good game. I also like how Michigan runs a lot of zone coverage. They're 26th in the country in zone coverage frequency. Plays into the strength of Alabama's offense. Jalen Milroe has actually been excellent against zone coverage. You can see on this graphic, all green on the bottom right for Alabama. So overall on this side of the ball, as long as Jalen Milroe has a decent game and isn't terrible, Alabama should be able to move the ball and score points on the Michigan defense. Now, what about the matchup on the other side? This is where we have, let's call it a mismatch. Alabama's defense 8th in DFEI. They're 22nd in the country in yards per play allowed, 20th in success rate. The Michigan offense has been a train wreck this year, 110th in yards per play, 81st in success rate. So definite mismatch in favor of Alabama. Now the Tide are missing key pieces on the defensive side. They're missing their safety and a corner. So 2 pieces from the secondary out for Alabama. That being said, I mean, does the Michigan passing attack scare you? The last 5 games, this was the peak of the Michigan passing attack, by the way, when Davis Warren got his starting job back. That was when the Michigan passing attack looked its best. So this is the peak of Michigan passing this year. 5.54 yards per pass attempt the last 5 games. This is the best it's been. 141 passing yards per game. This is not a good passing offense. In fact, it's pretty terrible. So even Alabama missing a couple pieces from the secondary, I'm not worried about it. Michigan can't throw the ball, especially considering they're missing their leading receiver, the tight end Loveland. He's not playing in this game. He was the team's leading receiver by far. They're also missing the left tackle. So, yeah, I do not expect Michigan to be able to throw the ball in this game. Now, they're also missing both backs. So is Michigan even going to be able to run the ball? This is an offense that needs to run the ball. They're missing Donovan Edwards and that kid Mullings. They're missing both of those guys. Now, let's not pretend that the Alabama defensive front has been locked down against the run, because it really hasn't. In their last 5 FBS games, I took the Mercer game out because who cares? In their last 5 FBS games, they're allowing over 4.8 yards per carry, over 169 rushing yards per game, 45% success rate per rush. So you can run the ball on Alabama a little bit. The problem is, do we really think this Michigan rushing attack is any good? I mean, if you take out the Northwestern game, they were able to run the ball on Northwestern. If you take out that game and look at their last 7, 3.6 yards per carry, under 40% success rate per rush. They really haven't been good at all running the ball. This offense is just pretty bad across the board, and they're missing their top 2 backs. So overall, I completely understand why Alabama's laying such a big number in this game. I mean, I think they should be able to name their score. Not to mention, I would imagine they're going to be more motivated here. This is a revenge spot. Michigan just beat them in the college football playoff last year in the semifinal in overtime. They had a miracle comeback drive. It was an awesome game. So I would imagine Alabama, pretty much at full strength, is going to be motivated to put the hurt on Michigan here. So I actually would lay it. Alabama minus 13.5 next game.
So literally right after I recorded that, I went to go bet Alabama minus 13.5, and it was gone. It's at 14.5 across the board. You can't get 13.5 anywhere anymore. It must have just happened because I was just looking at it. So instead of laying 14.5, 14 is obviously a key number. I think I'd rather go Michigan team total under 14.5. Would probably be my favorite pick for this game. As of right now, there's 5 college football games on New Year's Eve, and this is the only one I don't have a bet open. So if I was to bet this game, I would probably go Michigan team total under 14.5. Next game.
Louisville versus Washington in the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl. Washington is catching 1 or 1.5, depending on your sports book. Total sitting at 49 or 49.5. Let's get into this one. We'll start with the Louisville offense against the Washington defense. On paper, Louisville should have the slight edge on this side of the ball. They're 16 yards per play, 28th in success rate. Washington's defense 30th and 87th. So Louisville offensively should have the edge here. Judging by the full season numbers. Here's the problem. Louisville's missing some key pieces in this game. They're going to be without their quarterback, Tyler Shuck, also their leading receivers and wide receiver 3. So key pieces of the passing attack missing here for Louisville. Starting at quarterback is going to be Harrison Bailey, who's actually a senior, but he hasn't started a football game since 2020 with Tennessee. He has played, but correct me if I'm wrong, I believe this is his first time starting a football game since 2020. So it's been a while. Safe to say the Louisville passing attack is not going to be as potent with a guy making his first start in 4 years and missing 2 of their top 3 receivers. Not to mention they're matched up against a Washington defense that's pretty much completely ready to go. Now, they are missing some pieces in terms of the depth, but the starting lineup, they're all going to play in this game. So we should see Washington's defense pretty much at full strength here. And this is a Washington defense that did not get thrown on this year. In their last 8 games, they're allowing just 6.49 yards per pass attempt, success rate at 40.2% per dropback, just 184.5 passing yards allowed per game. This is a great pass defense this year. They're at full strength. Got a quarterback starting that hasn't started a game in 4 years. I doubt Louisville's going to be able to throw the ball in this game. Here's the problem, though. Look at the left side of this graphic. Washington kind of got exposed on the ground in the second half of the year. In those same last 8 games, they allowed 5 yards per carry, over 53% success rate per rush, over 184 rushing yards per game. And this is a Louisville offense that's more than capable of running the football. They got off to a bit of a slow start running the ball earlier in the year, but in their last 6 games, they were averaging 5.9 yards per carry, over 48% success rate per rush, over 196 rushing yards per game. So Louisville should be able to run the ball on this Washington defense. I'm a little worried about the offense being very one-dimensional, though. I mean, with the quarterback missing the receivers, how much of a passing threat is there? Makes it easier to coach against if you're on the Washington side. Not saying they can stop the Louisville rushing attack, but I think it's pretty obvious that Louisville needs to run the football in this game. Makes it easier to game plan against. Now, what about on the other side of the ball? We got the Washington offense against the Louisville defense, and on paper, this is a pretty even matchup. Louisville defensively 55th in yards per play, 43rd at success rate. The Washington offense 55th and 25th. So like I said, these two teams pretty evenly matched as far as the full season numbers go. Now, we are missing some pieces from the Washington offense in this game. Quarterback Will Rogers is not going to play. Same goes for their starting left guard. I listed the left tackle on here because he's not going to play, but their original starting left tackle is back from injury. The guy who's in the transfer portal, the guy listed here, he did start for most of the year, but he's technically not the starter. He took over for an injured player who's now returning. So they're actually getting their left tackle back. The quarterback taking over for Will Rogers is a freshman, Damon Williams Jr. I'm not going to pretend to know a ton about him. He has some great looking numbers this year. He threw for almost 600 yards. Didn't really see any meaningful action though. Played in a lot of blowouts. He played in almost every single game, but it was pretty much the last drive of the game. Like I said, he did rack up like 550, 600 passing yards on the year, and the efficiency numbers are great, but it's definitely important to point out that he didn't really play any meaningful football. It was pretty much in the garbage time of games. We are missing some pieces from the Louisville defense as well, a corner and an edge rusher. So Louisville's defense is not at full strength either. So will Washington be able to move the ball on this defense? Well, when it comes to Louisville's defense against the pass, it's kind of tough to get a feel for because in 3 games, they were absolutely terrible. The Georgia Tech game, in 4 games. The Georgia Tech game, the SMU game, the Miami game, and the Stanford game. Weirdly, the Stanford game, they struggled. They allowed over 311 passing yards per game, over 9.9 yards per attempt, 49% success rate per dropback. Terrible against the pass in those 4 games. Here's where it gets confusing. In their other 8 games this year, they were lights out against the pass. Look at the numbers on the right side of this graphic. I mean, they played great defense against the pass in their other 8 games, but we saw 4 instances where Louisville really struggled to defend the pass. Now, keep in mind, we're talking about a freshman quarterback making his first start, so I doubt he's just going to piece Louisville's defense up, but we have seen them get pieced up a few times this year, and they are missing a corner and an edge rusher, so maybe this kid is able to make some throws. I personally would lean towards the Louisville pass defense there. But as a whole, I'd say it's really uncertain. Missing pieces. This Louisville pass defense was kind of all over the place. Really not sure what to expect there as far as this freshman throwing the ball in Louisville's secondary. Here's something I might like, though. If you pull up the game logs from Louisville's defense, this team might be susceptible to the run. They were a little disappointing in that department. They were supposed to be this elite run defense this year, and they really weren't. I mean, SMU ran the ball on them, Miami, Clemson ran the ball on them, Kentucky. We've seen this defense get run on several times this year. Now, you might be thinking, Kyle, who cares? Washington can't run the ball. And you'd be right. I mean, their last 7 games, 3.22 yards per carry, 102 rushing yards per game. This is not a great rushing attack, but Will Rogers was playing quarterback, and he is a statue in the pocket. This kid, this freshman, is an athlete. He can move. Not to mention their star running back for Washington. He's back. He's playing in this game. So I actually think that's the sharp angle there. I think Washington can run the ball on Louisville in this one, which is why I kind of want to take Washington. Louisville's offense is centered around the pass with the backup quarterback, with missing all their wide receivers. I don't think they're going to be able to throw it. Is Louisville going to be able to run the football in this game? Yeah, probably, but I think Washington is going to be able to as well, and I think this Washington defense at full strength is more battle-tested playing in the Big Ten. I'm going to take the 1.5. I'm on the Huskies here. Washington plus 1.5 next game. South Carolina, Illinois in the Citrus Bowl. Illinois is catching 9.5 or 9. Actually, I see 9s popping up now. Total sitting at 49 or 49.5. Let's take a look at the matchup here. We'll start with the South Carolina offense against the Illinois defense. On paper, South Carolina should have the edge here. They're 66th in yards per play, 63rd in success rate, 37th in OFEI. Illinois, this year's been a struggle defensively. They did finish out the year strong, though, but they're 55th in yards per play allowed, 114th in success rate. So on paper, based on the full season numbers, South Carolina should be able to move the ball and score points on Illinois. The Gamecocks offense should pretty much be at full strength. They are missing Rocket Sanders, though. The star running back transferred in this year from Arkansas, so they will be without Sanders in this one. On the Illinois side, I mean, couple injuries late in the season, but no opt-outs. So Illinois' defense should pretty much be the same unit we saw to finish out the year. Now, you might be wondering why this line is 9, 9.5. Both of these teams are 9-3. South Carolina plays a stronger schedule, but it's not significant. I mean, Illinois plays in the Big Ten. It's not like they play in the MAC. So you might be wondering, why is this line 9, 9.5? I mean, these two teams shouldn't be that far apart based on the entire body of work. And the answer to that is right here. South Carolina finished off the season on an absolute warpath. In their last 5 games, 35.8 points per game, almost 50% success rate, over 7.3 yards per play. This South Carolina offense was looking nuclear to finish out the season. And yes, not having Rocket Sanders in the backfield definitely hurts, but This kid Sellers is slinging the ball, man. In the last 5 games, over 268 passing yards per game, over 52% success rate per dropback, over 10.2 yards per attempt. He looks great. Now, we do have to give the Illinois defense some credit. Like I said before, they were playing their best defense down the stretch of the season. In their last 4 FBS games, they were allowing 25 points per game, which obviously isn't great looking, but just 5.04 yards per play. Success rate down at 43%. And yeah, these numbers aren't elite, but compare them to their numbers from their first 7 FBS games, and no question, they were playing much better defense down the stretch. And there's a couple decent offenses in there. Minnesota, they could throw the ball with Brosmer. Michigan State with Childs, Rutgers. So, I mean, it's not like they played complete scrubs. Illinois' defense was playing their best football towards the end of the season. And look specifically at their numbers against the pass in those same 4 last games. Just 5.6 yards per pass attempt, 39.1% success rate per dropback. So they were playing great defense against the pass. And like I said, you got Minnesota in there. You got Michigan State. I mean, Rutgers with Callie McManus, Northwestern, not exactly dynamic passing attacks, but we do got to give Illinois a little bit of credit. They were playing their best defensive football towards the end of the season. So does that mean they're able to limit Lenora Sellers and the South Carolina offense? I think I'd have to lean towards no on that one. I definitely don't like how Illinois runs a lot of man coverage. They're 3rd in the country in man coverage frequency. Kind of plays into the strength of the South Carolina offense. They've got good passing numbers against man coverage so far this year. And also, when it comes to Illinois stopping the run, their numbers on the year don't look that bad. But if you isolate it to just their 4 games against top 25 offenses, they allowed over 5.4 yards per carry, 58% success rate per rush, over 217 rushing yards per game. So when they saw these elite offenses, they really struggled to stop the run. Now, we do have to keep in mind that South Carolina is missing their star running back, but I mean, these numbers are pretty bad. That leads me to believe that South Carolina probably can run the ball even without Sanders. So as a whole, if I had to make a prediction, I would imagine South Carolina is able to move the ball and score points in this one. But what about the matchup on the other side? We got Illinois' offense against South Carolina's defense. South Carolina should definitely have the edge on this side. They're 8th in yards per play, 51st in success rate. They're 5th in DFEI. Illinois' offense, I mean, it had its ups and downs. When they saw the better defenses, they kind of folded. On the season, they're 66th in yards per play, 55th in success rate. Inactives on this side of the ball. Actually, both these units are missing one piece, but it's a key piece. Illinois missing their star wide receiver, leading receiver, Pat Bryant. He won't play in this game. And South Carolina is missing Kennard, their star edge rusher. You'll be hearing his name in April. If you don't know who this is, if you're an NFL draft guy, you will know who this is in April. He's going to be a first-round pick, one of the best edge rushers in the draft. He won SEC Defensive Player of the Year. So like I said, if you don't know who this is now, NFL draft time, you will know who this is. What concerns me about the Illinois offense, and I just mentioned this before, it seems like when they saw the tougher defenses, they just didn't show up. They played 5 games this year against top 25 defenses. They averaged just 17 points per game, 4.92 yards per play, 42% success rate. And what makes it even worse, the only defense they saw this entire season that would be comparable to South Carolina was Penn State. And in week 5, they went on the road to Happy Valley, and they couldn't do shit. 3.84 yards per play, success rate under 34%. They were held to 7 points. I covered Illinois plus 17 in this game by a miracle. I forget exactly what the line was, but I covered it. I didn't deserve it. This offense looked terrible. They couldn't do anything against Penn State. This is a South Carolina defense that's been pretty much excellent this entire season. In their last 8 games, they're holding opponents to 18.3 points per game, under 42% success rate, 5.1 yards per play. Look at the opponents. Ole Miss, Alabama, Oklahoma, okay, that offense sucks. Texas A&M, Vandy, Missouri, Wofford's in there, and Clemson. So it's not like they're playing scrubs. They're playing an SEC schedule, holding opponents to 18.3 points per game. And specifically, what I don't like here for Illinois is Luke Altmaier has shown us he struggles under pressure. His numbers when given a clean pocket are great, but we see a serious drop-off in production when he experiences pressure. And I know Kennard's not playing in this game for South Carolina, but they're still loaded. This is still a top pass rush here. And Illinois struggled in pass protection this entire season. They're 93rd in the country in pressure rate allowed, 100th in pass blocking grade. So South Carolina should have no problems generating pressure even without Kennard, which is why when it comes to betting this game, I mean, I know 9 points is a lot, but I think South Carolina might run away with this one. They finished the season with so much momentum. Pass rush should be able to get to Altmaier. I doubt Illinois can run the ball. Sellers should have opportunities to make plays against that man coverage. So yeah, I like South Carolina to win this one by double digits. I'll lay it. South Carolina -9 next game. We got Baylor against LSU in the Texas Bowl here. LSU's catching 3.5 points. Total sitting up at 61.5. And before we get into this one, let's point out the heater that Baylor's been on. Since week 8, Baylor is 6-0 straight up, 6-0 against the spread. Been a while since Baylor lost a football game, so Baylor coming into this one on a scorcher. So will the Baylor hot streak continue? Let's start with the offense against LSU's defense. This should be a favorable matchup for Baylor. LSU, as I'm sure you know, not a team known for its defense. They do play an SEC schedule, though, which is important to point out. Baylor offensively, 21st in yards per play, 24th in success rate. They can run it, they can throw it, they can do it all. They're 22nd in OFEI. LSU's defense, 76th in yards per play, 63rd in success rate, 29th in DFEI. We should be seeing Baylor's offense at full strength for this one. No opt-outs in terms of the starting lineup. No opt-outs on the offensive side of the ball for Baylor. On the defensive side for LSU, they're missing both starting safeties. Sage Ryan and Major Burns both opted out of this game, so both safeties out for LSU. And missing those safeties definitely concerns me here for LSU's defense. I mentioned how Baylor's been on a heater, right? Well, the offense is averaging over 41 points per game in their last 6, 7.2 yards per play, over 52% success rate. And the reason the safeties concern me, look at their rushing numbers. Over 242 rushing yards per game, over 5.9 yards per carry, almost 52% success rate per rush. This Baylor offense is going to hand it off 40 times. Is there anything LSU's defense can do to stop it? I mean, in their last 5 games, they're allowing over 5.4 yards per carry, over 47% success rate per rush, 191 rushing yards per game, and now they're missing both safeties? How is LSU going to stop the run here? I mean, this LSU defensive line has been excellent in terms of pressuring the passer. They're actually first in pressure rate, 7th in sack rate, 10th in pass rush grade. But in terms of staying on the line of scrimmage against the run game, not nearly as good. And this Baylor offensive line has done a great job, especially in the second half of the season. So Baylor's going to hand the ball off, and I don't think there's anything LSU can do to stop it. And honestly, Baylor can probably throw the ball as well. Sawyer Robertson has been great down the stretch. On the season, he's got over 2,600 yards, 8.3 yards per attempt, 26 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Baylor is an offense that wants to run the ball, but during this 6-game winning streak, they've got some excellent passing numbers as well. Over 263 passing yards per game, over 9.1 yards per attempt, over 52% success rate per dropback. So it's not like Baylor can't throw the ball. Now, the LSU defense has been much better against the pass than it has been against the run, mainly because of the pass rush. So they probably are able to generate some pressure and throw Sawyer Robertson off a bit. But missing both safeties, I mean, I don't know. I think Baylor might be able to throw the ball as well. I don't have a lot of faith in the LSU defense in this game. In my opinion, the main question is on the other side of the ball. LSU's offense against Baylor's defense. Now, on paper, this should be a beautiful matchup for LSU offensively. They're 31st in yards per play, 48th in success rate, but specifically the passing attack. 49th in yards per pass attempt, 26th in success rate per dropback, 4th in effective pass against a Baylor secondary that's really struggled to defend the pass. I mean, 88th, 80th, 73rd. This is a bad pass defense against one of the most explosive passing attacks in the SEC here. Here's the problem. LSU is missing all kinds of pieces on the offensive side of the ball, and they all affect the passing attack. Their star wide receiver, Kyron Lacey, is not playing in this game. C.J. Daniels, their third wide receiver, not playing in this game. Also, their tight end, who's the third leading receiver on the team, he's not playing in this game. They're missing both offensive tackles. Who are the most important pieces when it comes to a passing attack? You got the quarterback, and Nussmeier is playing. Then you got the receivers and the tackles. So the passing attack, if we're relying on the LSU passing attack to keep up with the Baylor offense, look at all the pieces they're missing. Meanwhile, just like the Baylor offense, there are no starters opting out on the defensive side of the ball for Baylor. So this Baylor defense should be at full strength. Now, here's the thing. This Baylor pass defense has looked so bad at some points during this season that part of me thinks LSU's second or even their third unit could still hang 35 points on them. I mean, look at these 3 games here. Week 9, Week 10, and Week 14 against Oklahoma State, TCU, and Kansas. They left 326 passing yards per game, over 53% success rate per dropback, 10.13 yards per attempt. That's against Oklahoma State, TCU, and Kansas. Not that those are bad teams, but this is LSU. This is a whole nother level of talent here. Now, if you are looking to bet Baylor, you can point at the fact that they've run pretty much exclusively zone coverage. They're 11th in the country in zone coverage frequency. LSU's passing attack has been much more efficient against man coverage. Actually, they're 105th in completion percentage against zone. So I guess you can point at that. But as a whole, if I'm being honest, I find it hard to believe that Baylor's defense, even at full strength, can make stops against LSU level talent, even if it's not the starting lineup. So I think LSU scores points right back here, even with the second unit. Now, one thing you do have to give to Baylor's defense is they're not nearly as bad against the run. Their front seven isn't nearly as bad. It's their secondary that gets cooked. So LSU probably isn't going to be able to run the ball in this game, partially because they're never able to run the ball. In the last 7 games, they're averaging 3.61 yards per carry, 107 rushing yards per game, success rate per rush under 40%. So Nussmeier's probably not going to have run support, but it's not like that's anything new. He never has run support. So Nussmeier, even with a bunch of freshmen, some freshmen on the offensive linemen, I still think they're going to score. That's why when it comes to betting this game, as much as I would love to lay the 3.5 with Baylor, and that's the way I'd probably lean, I think the over up at 61.5 is the bet. I know 61.5 is a lot of points, but we should see a lot of scoring. So give me the over here, 61.5 next game. And now finally the college football playoff game. Penn State on the road at Boise for this one. Boise catching 11 points at home here. Total sitting at 53.5. Let's get into this one. We'll start with the Penn State offense against the Boise State defense. Obviously, Penn State has the edge on both sides of the ball. But the Penn State offense is 4th in yards per play, 3rd in success rate. Boise State defensively 55th and 29th. Now, the Boise State defensive front, not that they've struggled against the run, but this entire season, they've only played 4 games against top 50 rated rushing attacks. Top 50. In those 4 games, they allowed over 5 yards per carry, 158 rushing yards per game, 42.2% success rate per rush. So when they've seen decent rushing attacks, they've struggled a little bit against the run. And Penn State just did this to Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. 292 rushing yards in the game, 8.34 yards per carry, over 70% success rate per rush. And they followed that up by playing SMU, who has a very good defensive front, in the first round of the college football playoff. 189 yards on the ground, 4.7 yards per carry. That's what they did to SMU's defensive front. And if I'm being honest, I just don't see a world where Boise State's defensive front 7 can compete here. I mean, the talent discrepancy. Check this out. So Penn State has 5 5-star recruits on the roster, 48 4-star recruits. Boise State has 1 5-star, 1 4-star. We're talking about 2 teams that aren't even in the same stratosphere when it comes to raw talent. So even though you look at Boise State's full season numbers against the run, it looks like they have some great run defense. But the truth is, every time they've seen a decent rushing attack, they've struggled to stop the run. So like I said, I just don't see a world where they can stop Penn State from handing the ball off and getting north of 5 yards per carry here. And when it comes to defending the pass, I mean, Boise State has played 5 games this year against top 54 rated passing attacks. I cut it off at 54 because I believe Utah State is 54. It was to include them. So they played 5 games this year against top 54 rated passing attacks. In those games, they allowed 342 passing yards per game, 8.96 yards per pass attempt, 46% success rate per dropback. That's against passing attacks rated in the top 54 according to Sharp College Football. Penn State is 17th, by the way. So Penn State should be able to run the ball, no problem. They should also be able to throw the ball, no problem, on Boise State's defense. But what about the matchup on the other side of the ball? We got Boise State's offense against Penn State's defense, and Boise State offensively deserves credit. They're 6th in yards per play, 15th in success rate. Excellent numbers on the ground, as I'm sure you know, with Ashton Genty. They're 3rd in yards per carry in the country, 16th in success rate per rush. That being said, they're going to have their hands full on this side of the ball as well, because we're talking about Penn State's defense here. 8th in yards per play allowed, 15th in success rate, elite against the run, elite against the pass. They're sitting at 11th in DFEI. I very seriously doubt Boise State's offensive line is able to give Matson time to throw in this one. Penn State's defensive front is 6th in pressure rate, 24th in sack rate, 7th in pass rush grade. Boise State's offensive line 53rd, 22nd, 61st. So Penn State should not have problems generating pressure in this one, and Matson's production falls off when pressured. When given a clean pocket, he's pretty good, but when under pressure, we see yards per attempt drop down to a D. So Penn State should be able to get pressure on Madsen in this one. Also, Penn State runs a ton of man coverage. They're 12th in the country in man coverage frequency. Boise State has much better numbers thrown in on zone. So another lean towards Penn State there. Everything just points towards Penn State in this matchup, if I'm being honest. But, you know, when we're talking about Boise State offense, obviously we need to talk about the run game with Ashton Genty. That's what Boise State is trying to do, and they're very good at it. In their last 6 games, they're averaging over 5.4 yards per carry, 49.6% success rate per rush, over 222 rushing yards per game. Official looking numbers here. But do we really expect Boise State's offensive line to generate push against the Penn State defensive front? Penn State's 3rd in stuff rate, 4th in line yards in the country against a Big Ten schedule. I just can't see it. I can't see Boise State's offensive line generating any push in this one. We're talking about Penn State's run defense. It might be the best in the country. During the regular season through the Big Ten championship game, Penn State was allowing just 3.27 yards per carry on the season. 38% success rate per rush. They followed that up by playing SMU in the first round of the college football playoff. How did the run defense do? Well, SMU ran the ball 36 times for 58 yards. I'm talking about 1.6 yards per carry. That's what SMU did on the ground against Penn State. And the truth is, when it comes to this Boise State offense, these rushing numbers, the Boise State rushing attack with Ashton Genty, you have to take into consideration the defenses that they've seen. So this is since week 5. Check this out. These are the Boise State opponent DFEI ratings. So these are the defensive ratings of Boise State's opponents since week 5. 85th, 124th, 103rd, 30th, 119th, 117th, 74th, 89th, 112th, 30th. So you got UNLV in there twice. Obviously, they're 30th. Other than that, the next best defense they've seen is San Jose State. So we have to consider that these are the defenses Boise State's seeing week in and week out. Penn State's defense is on an entirely different planet than every name on this list. So yeah, I mean, I just don't see it. I'm taking Penn State. I think they should win comfortably. Now, I know everyone's remembering the Boise State-Oklahoma game. That was awesome football game. In fact, it's probably one of the best football games we've seen in the last 25 years with the trick plays to beat them and all that. I know everyone's thinking about that, and it is college football. It's January. Anything can happen. I completely get it. If you're betting Boise State here, I'm sure they're going to have some tricks up their sleeve. But personally, the talent discrepancy is just too great here. So I'm going to lay the 11. Give me Penn State minus 11. We'll talk about it on the live show, 4 p.m. Eastern time. We'll go through the NBA slate, some college basketball. If you're able to make it, we'd love to see you in the comments. Let's have ourselves a good one. Please remember to bet responsibly. Hit me up in the Discord if you need me.